Great, thank you, Guthrie. And we have had some members of the public join other sessions, so that may happen just so everyone knows they won't be on camera or able to speak or chat, but may have some folks join and listen in. So welcome, everyone. I'm Sarah with Coraggio Group, and I'll get us started today. So as you know, the HECC is updating and developing their next strategic plan. We are working with them as their consultant partners in that process. And our first phase is a phase that we call Get Clear. And that phase is focused on getting as many perspectives and voices into the process as we can. So we conducted a survey. We are doing these focus groups. We've done some interviews. We've been looking at, relevant background documents and data. We will pull all of that together to create a report with key themes to inform the strategic planning process. Those will be supported with data from our survey, from the documents that we looked at, as well as quotes from both open-ended survey responses and our focus groups and interviews. So we may use some quotes from today. As Guthrie mentioned, the meeting will be recorded, but our quotes in the report are anonymized and we won't include any attributing information, and really want you all to share your candid perspectives today. And to that end, we have 3 agreements that we always ask folks to commit to in our focus groups. The first one being to step up and step back. We'd really like to hear from everyone today, so encourage you to share and participate, and also want to make sure we have a chance to hear from everyone, so please make space for others as well. And you can use the chat additionally, so we'll have a chance for folks to respond verbally. We probably won't be able to hear from every person on every question though. So do feel free to also chime in the chat occasionally, and don't feel the need to necessarily respond to every question. The next one is to allow for different perspectives. So we do not need to get to any kind of consensus today. We don't need to debate things. We can hold space for many different perspectives. We would expect and encourage that today. Invite you to differentiate from one another. And we would really like to request that you all be bold in what you share today. We're going to be asking some important pictures or questions about the future of higher education in our state. And we would love and invite your bold thinking and bold ideas. Can everyone commit to those agreements? Show me a thumbs up if that works. Great. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. So we will do a round of introductions here, and I will put the prompt into the chat. And just to share a bit more about us, again, I mentioned that I'm Sarah. I work with Coraggio Group. I'm a principal consultant there. Been with our firm for about 7.5 years. And I lead our community prosperity practice. So I know I've engaged and connected with some of you in other facets. Our community prosperity practice works in post-secondary education, workforce development, and economic development. We're based in Oregon, and we do that work across the state. I'm based in Central Oregon. And what else? I use she, her pronouns. And I'll pass it to Colleen to introduce herself.
I'm Floyd. I'm one of the associate principals at Coraggio Group. So I am leading the logistics of this project in partnership with Sarah. So I'm actually based out of Phoenix, Arizona, but I have certainly been to Oregon and love it there. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Great, and if y'all don't mind, I'm just gonna call in folks to introduce themselves. Teresa, you joined us first today, so I'm gonna ask you to kick us off if you don't mind.
Great, no problem. My name is Teresa Alonso Leon. I use she, her, ella pronouns. Former legislator, my term ended in 2023. I'm also first Latina chair of the House Education Committee, and I also chaired the Student Voice Task Force that allowed for legislators to travel around the state to talk to students in post-secondary higher ed about their experiences, and we were able to then create policies based on that. And I'm now working full-time in my consulting business, and I focus on education, specifically higher ed, healthcare equity, and leadership development.
Thank you so much. Let's see, let's go to Randy.
Terrific, thanks. I am Randy Weber. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I serve as the president of Rogue Community College. And so we obviously have a close relationship with HECC.
Excellent. Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Okay, hi, I'm Gail Yamasaki. I'm in Klamath Falls, Oregon, and I am also a commissioner for HECC. So I think that's
Excellent.
probably enough.
Yeah, thank you. Charlene.
Hello, I'm Dr. Charlene Williams, Director for the Oregon Department of Education, and collaborate with HECC frequently. I use she, her pronouns.
Thank you. And Kyle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Ritchie-Newell, and I am the Director of Education and Workforce Policy for the Oregon Business Council. We are a CEO roundtable, a statewide roundtable, and we work on public policy issues and systems change. I use she, her pronouns. And we have worked with and continue to work with the HECC in many different ways at many different levels. So I would say the youth programs, financial aid, opportunity grants, policy. Duncan Wise, who is our president, was one of the founding commissioners of the HECC and was active in the effort to sort of establish the independent campuses. So we work very closely with the team. I think a couple of specific examples, I serve as a member of the STEM Investment Council Advisory Board, and so have worked with the HECC in creating the STEM education plan over the years. And then another example, right now, we're working very closely in terms of talent development and looking at pathways for the semiconductor industry. And so we just completed a semiconductor talent assessment, which the HECC developed for us. So that just gives a couple of examples to bring that work to life, but we do really enjoy working with them.
Excellent.
Sarah, if I may add a couple things
Please.
that I missed at first. So I worked with the HECC before I became the HECC. I worked for as the GED administrator. And then currently I'm leading the work on the community table committee where we've developed kind of a 2.0 of the task force that is going to be creating some policies that address the issues that our students brought up. And actually Kyle is part of our community table. And yeah, and we're working closely with the HECC to ensure that, we're following some of that protocol in respect to policy development and whatnot. And there are I want to call them kind of our advisors and support and the work that we're going to be doing.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. So we'll go ahead and get started unless anybody else has any questions or anything else to add. All right. I'll invite folks to stay on mute unless you're speaking. That is helpful. Thanks for doing that. And we can use the raise hand function to indicate when you'd like to speak. You can also just do that visually and I'll see you. And again, feel free to use the chat as we go. We have 9 questions that we'd love to get through. We'll see if we can. I'll put the first one into the chat. So starting pretty big picture, from your perspective, what impact do you think the HECC should have on Oregon? Yeah, Randy.
I'll throw something out there and let somebody else answer first next
Great.
time. I come to Oregon from a state with a model very similar and more mature, with the Board of Regents similar to HECC. I think the way it's designed, it helps us best or most when they can help make sure that higher ed in Oregon is situated to meet the needs of our education system, our workforce. And knowing that there are nuanced differences amongst the universities and the colleges and the populations we serve. How we get into kind of some more of that, I'm sure will be on a couple later questions. But I think that what the HECC can do is best serve the state's interests in making sure higher ed is meeting our people's needs.
Great. Thanks for getting us started.
I can build on that a little bit and just say that to do that very well, I think we have to really understand what are the barriers and the challenges that keep Oregonians from being able to access post-secondary. And so I think that one of the things the HECC can do is really help us understand those barriers and the policy levers that will ensure that we have very equitable post-secondary attainment, and understand, from a policy perspective, how we can make those changes in the state to enact much more equitable attainment.
Okay, thank you.
I'll add to that. I think that the HECC has the potential to be a broader voice in respect to educating the state around educational opportunities. Right now, I think that there's some miscommunication or misconception that when we say post-secondary education, that it only means college degrees. And we want to stop that thinking, because really we want what I consider global education, everything from apprenticeship to trades to CTE programs into degrees, and as high as you want to go. And so I think that the HECC has a potential of really honing in on that communication, because in some of our research or some of the feedback we received from students in our task force was that they didn't believe Oregon was a college-going state. Mm-hmm. And so, and this means that we need to do more communication out to communities. So there's a natural transition from K-12 into what it means to go into post-secondary education, and that we celebrate our kids and adults that go into any of the spectrum of educational opportunities post high school or GED.
Thank you. And see, Charlene chiming in the chat, thanks for getting us going there. And just know that Colleen's grabbing everything that shows up in the chat into our notes as well. Okay. I'm going to move us on to our next question. If anybody else wants to contribute there. So this is a 3-year strategic plan. Will be a 3-year strategic plan, so hence the 3-year parameters on this question. But what do you see as the most significant challenges for higher education in Oregon over the next 3 years?
One that's obvious, I think, is the declining enrollments and the fiscal challenges that presents to the institutions. And it aligns with what Teresa was saying earlier, just about the perceptions about post-secondary education. the changing beliefs about the need or the relevance. So that at a macro level, some of those will be really significant challenges, I believe.
Thank you.
I'll add to that, and this is based on what we're trying to do in the work that I'm doing with the community table. Our focus is transformational change in post-secondary higher education. And that's going to mean that the HECC is going, or not the HECC, but the state is going to need to focus on post-secondary higher ed in a way they've never done before. And that's through investment, basically what Kyle mentioned. And we don't know what that's going to look like, because we're going to need not just legislators to support, but really the state of Oregon to support. The way our institutions currently recruit for students. The traditional ways are impacting the students who are traditionally not invited to go to college. And so what would it look like if they changed all of those techniques and recruited more students of color intentionally? I think right now there's definitely room for improvement, for change, for a refocus. And then I think we also need to look at our adult learners who come back from industry. Our adult learners have told us there's scholarships for freshmen who are coming out of high school, but there aren't scholarships for freshmen who are coming out of an industry that's shut down. And so we don't have a focus on that student population. So I think that if we really do take a good look at recruitment, not just from high schools, that we look at GED student populations, that we look at the adult student populations, that's going to bring in more students into the pool. So just I think that there's definitely this we need to look at transformation in the way we do things.
Thank you. Yeah, Gail.
Well, I think three things come to mind initially. One is affordability, access, completion. I think that's part of the quality. I think we have to ask ourselves, what kind of quality of life and how do Oregonians determine what success looks like for them in the communities and the lives that they want to be into and contribute to Oregon? And with that, I think that we have to have more critical conversations. I think, Charlene, I love that you're here, because I think that there's this huge pipeline of pre-K through the end of whatever someone determines is their post-secondary experience, whether that's an apprenticeship, a certificate, or what that completion looks like for an Oregonian to determine for themselves that they are a successful person within the state they live in. And so I do think that whole idea, it can be data driven, the HECC can provide research, but I really think it's getting all of us together to have those critical conversations that are very student centered. And we know that, whoever determines themselves as a student is very different than maybe what we grew up at and assumed were students. And so that's my thought about this question.
Thank you. Again, see some folks chiming in the chat. Thank you. I'm going to add our third question, which is, what are the top 3 things, and no pressure to list 3, we will, I'm sure, collectively come up with 3, but what are the top things, most important things that HECC can do to increase educational attainment for learners in Oregon? Thanks, Randy. Sorry, see you now.
I'm going to jump on my soapbox here real quick while I can. And I think I think the main thing that, and it has a lot of tentacles, so it'll be three within it, is to look, I often say with HECC team a lot, looking at their own vision statement, right? It says the coordinating commission envisions a future in which all Oregonians, especially those whom our systems have underserved and marginalized, have benefit from transformational power of high quality post-secondary ed. And when I look at some of the decisions that we have made and we continue to make, I don't always agree that their interests are top of mind. And most specifically, I'm going to go ahead and jump on efforts that were led by Representative Alonzo Leon with the task force. We learned a lot of things about students who are underserved in their educational experience, and legislatively, we went ahead and we advocated for an increase to the Oregon Opportunity Grant. It was increased from 200 to 300 million. The champions for that were the community colleges, because we saw that by increasing that, at least under that model, we would be well served to address the needs of these particular students. So this was the singular bill that for us worked best. Well, as the new rollout came out, 15% of the increased funds went to students at community colleges, 85% went to universities. So we carried this load for something that went that way. And the reason I tell this story is I don't think we looked at those underserved students, where they start, where their challenges are, which is frequently at the community college when that decision was made. And at HECC, and it happens at my institution too, so I don't want to be too critical, I've watched sometimes we make system decisions that are easier for staff to manage than best for students. So we have deadlines for processes because it's easier for us to manage it. Well, these are the students who don't meet those deadlines. So they don't get those access to those resources. So it's going to impact their retention because they don't have the same resources as their students who applied 6 weeks earlier did. They have just as much, if not more, need, but they didn't apply in time. So we're penalizing students who don't plan. And you know who students are who don't plan? Disproportionately students who are underserved and come from these backgrounds. So that's an example where we just see it over and over, where I think we make decisions that make it easier for us to administer a program and not that have the greatest impact on the students with greatest need. All right, now I'll jump off my soapbox.
Thank you. Would others add in terms of what the HECC can do to increase educational attainment for learners in art? Thanks, Kyle.
I sometimes wonder too if there's work that we can do collectively much earlier to really help learners think about and create a plan for their own aspirations, so that in fact by the time they get to that next stage, they have some sense of excitement and a plan to go along with, even if that will change a bit, because we know people's interests change. But so often I think it's difficult if we haven't prepared them in, high school or middle school to think about those things and to create an understanding of their interests and their gifts and then their aspirations, and then really think of the post-secondary system, whether that's an apprenticeship or the trades or credentials, degrees, etc. Think about that as just a continuing step, not a whole new system that you need to be, put over into. Remove some of those barriers and just help them streamline that process to just moving down the path to reach their aspirations. I realize that's easier said than done, but that would be a beautiful vision if we could get to that point where we help them early and then help them create that plan to accomplish it.
Thank you. Yeah, Gail.
Well, One of the things I think that HECC could do, or as a, I mean, it's the affordability of an education. It doesn't matter, you know, what it is you want to do if you can't afford to even walk in the door. So I think affordability is a huge thing.
Thank you.
Yep.
Teresa?
So I'm a bit maybe a little bit confused about the term what the heck can do to increase educational attainment to learners, because I feel like a lot of the work they do has to do with legislation directives. And I feel like there's so much that we need to do with legislators to better understand the heck in their work, right? How that impacts the decisions they make. So if they don't understand what the heck does, then, you know, I feel like there's still a lot of learning to do within even our legislators around higher education work. A lot of focus has been done on the K-12 system, which I think is amazing and great, but it hasn't been done across the entire educational spectrum. And so I feel like there's the head can only do as much as the legislation allows it to do. I personally wish that they had more autonomy, and I think that there would be more opportunity for creative thinking and alignment with ODE and beyond, and other partners. So that's me coming from a legislative perspective. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, Randy.
Yeah, I think another thing that HECC can do is all access isn't created equally. So it's not good enough to have access to the university or access to the college. It's access to the programs and the supports that will help different students succeed. And so we have selective admissions programs at our institutions that have different entry point things that disproportionately impact some students. The other thing that we have is, like with the funding model, all FTEs funded equally. Not all FTE cost the same. So what ends up happening is we start adding on top of our tuition and fees for these high cost to deliver programs, increased fees for students. And then what ends up happening there, not by intent, but that's out of necessity, it ends up, impacting who enrolls in those programs. So students who may not choose to go into the higher earning jobs because they can't afford the program, not because they're not able, not because they wouldn't be good fits for the industry, they wouldn't add to the profession, but because access to the institution wasn't enough. They could study liberal arts and humanities, but they can't study these higher cost to deliver programs because the way our funding model works, that additional cost goes directly on the backs of the students, and that doesn't happen in every state necessarily.
Thank you. Add our next question into the chat. What do you see as the Commission's role in promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion? Yeah, Teresa.
I see them as an entity that reinforces this idea. I think that it makes me sad to know that some states are removing positions that are DEI in institutions, and the state isn't doing anything about it. I love that our state does focus on these issues. I feel like we could do more. It's Oregon after all, but we're in a position where we could absolutely own it and reinforce it. And this is a comment I've made in respect to my cultural competency bill that I passed in 2017, that if the institution's boards support this idea, then everybody will follow. And I think that's the case here. If the commission supports the idea of centering this concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, then everybody's going to follow. So if they don't internalize it and believe it in the work that they do, in the strategy, in the strategic planning that they create, then, you know, it's like, what's the point?
Thank you. Kyle. Kyle, you're muted. Thanks.
Thank you. The role that HECC plays as sort of being the champion of that vision, and then also continuing to communicate through data and their research so that we truly know who is accessing the system, who is completing, who, you know, how is our funding leading to equitable or inequitable kinds of outcomes. And then the communication about that on an ongoing basis so that we continue to really draw awareness to that goal that we share.
Thank you. Anything that others want to add? Okay. Put our next question in the chat. Thanks, Teresa. A longer one, but it's because we're giving you some data from the recent Oregon Values and Beliefs Survey, which indicated that 72% of Oregonians lean toward a feeling that a technical trade education is often a better pathway to success than a university education, while 28% feel that a university education is the best pathway to success. In your view, what are the reasons? What's the reasoning behind these opinions? Yeah, Charlene.
I wonder if some of it could be, you know, we have this national movement to pay down all of this school loan debt, for example, people going off, getting degrees, and maybe landing in a career close to what they went to college for. Whereas when you go and you get something in the trades, you have a very specific skill with a very specific outcome and a higher probability of landing and making a good wage. And we don't value that enough in our society and community. So I'm guessing just the history around the debt and job prospects often, which again goes to the point I was making earlier about helping students make that transition from post-secondary into the workforce.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, Teresa.
Yeah, I'll definitely underscore this idea, and this came from our students as well on the task force. What they said was, just like it's not a smooth transition from our K-12 system into post-secondary. There isn't a smooth transition from graduating into the workforce. I share my personal story about when I graduated in both my degrees. It was almost like, hey, congratulations, good luck. As opposed to there being a system in place. And this is why this work we're doing is so important, is having a system where all of our students get paid internship opportunities, right, in the career fields they're interested in. And because they have that exposure, we could be setting them up for a job in the career field so that when they graduate, they have a job waiting for them. So that is the vision that I hope we can achieve with the work that we're doing in the community table, because that's not happening right now. And equally, that smooth transition from our K-12 system and GED student population into post-secondary, if we were to endorse and support the idea of what I consider global education and the spectrum of opportunities. So those things, those two bridges are not strong right now. And, I think we can definitely do a better job.
Thanks. And Randy, apologize. I missed your hand earlier. Go ahead.
No worries. I think this is a question where, we've got a branding issue, and probably it's in around the value prop that we talked a little bit earlier. Interestingly, we commissioned a report with NCHEMS that's a couple of years old now, but in that report, some of the results we received were that Oregon is 49th in the country in college going rate out of high school, whether it's college or university. And you put that on the back of, we were 45th in the country in ninth graders who graduate high school. You've got a pipeline problem into post-secondary, period. Whether it's trade tech, whether it's gen ed. But I think to that point, what people want if they're going to pursue something post-secondary is they want something that leads directly to a job. And the perception right now, which isn't great, is that a lot of baccalaureate, unless it's a specific qualifies you for a unique position like a trade does, that value prop is as low as it's been in this state. And so I think part of it is from an economic development. What are we doing to attract employers who value bachelor's degrees? I talk with industry leaders all the time and say, I can't get you a more qualified workforce if you're not going to value education, if you're not going to start them at a higher wage than you would have started them if they'd have walked off the street. Our recruitment team's good. They're not that good. So working on that. So I think we've got some issues with what does it mean to get to participate in post-secondary education? Because right now, I think the biggest perception is if it doesn't directly lead me to a job I'm uniquely qualified for, I'm not interested in it. And we know that there's a greater good for society, and a lot of our upper level managers, come and have liberal arts and humanities degrees. And so there's good things there. But I don't know that we have a participation problem in Oregon, and the statistic that you put in this question just reinforces that.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to keep us moving just in the interest of time, but we can always come back around, or if there's questions you want to follow up on in the chat, please feel free to do so. So our sixth question is, what policy and advocacy issues would you like to see the HECC prioritizing? Thanks for getting us going, Randy.
Just more of these. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
That's okay. Go ahead, Charlene, thank you.
More of what is in the chat, these bridge building kinds of activities. So we've been in partnership around how do we help our juniors and seniors have exposure to FAFSA completion efforts, direct admission efforts, those kinds of things, more strategies on how to build those bridges tighter between K-12 and post-secondary.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, I'm going to put our next question into the chat, which is, as you think about where you would like to see the HECC focused, what are some trade-offs that you could imagine they would need to consider? So, another way to think of this is, in order to focus deeply in the areas you've mentioned, is there anything that they could do less of or stop doing, or put less focus on? Yeah, Randy.
Yeah, I'm careful to say what I think that HECC could be doing less of. I will say our coordinates instead of governance leaves HECC from like in really kind of overlooking the colleges and universities too much. So I don't know that there's a burden there. I just wonder if there are things that could be done differently, or maybe to the work that's being done now to a different end. So if we imagined a different end where this is the outcome we're aiming for, could today's work be focused differently? And so I'm thinking more along different instead of less, because I don't know, I can't think top of mind, and I've been in the state just over a year and a half. I'm not seeing a lot of work personally that I'm like, that is just unnecessary and creates additional workload for others. But I think that just, and I'll add to that, the challenges I've seen is I've seen a lot of work put towards something that I would argue that, is that really the desired outcome? And so no better for me personally than looking at the redesign of the opportunity grant. A lot of work went into that. As a matter of fact, so much work we would have preferred it hadn't been done day one, so there's things like that and we're working hard as colleges to work a little more closely with staff to make sure we understand what projects they're working on and how we can work with them on it. So probably different instead of less.
Thanks for that. Some other, and less or stop doing may or may not be a helpful frame, but if there's things that you can think about in terms of their work where there's some kind of spectrum, and funding could be an example of, how much of the HECC's funding budget should go directly to institutions versus directly to students. Like thinking about maybe some of these kind of you know, something that's maybe more like on a spectrum of where you would like to see the scales tipping, for example. Yeah, Gail.
Well, one thing that comes to my mind is what would it look like if we didn't have to depend on the legislature so much for funding? What might life look like if colleges, universities, institutions were fully funded by the formula? What might be happening? And because so much of this is driven by affordability, right? Access, affordability, relevancy of the affordability of the access we're given. And so I just think, what might it look like if we were all not so depending on a legislature that for funding? I don't know.
Thanks. Yeah, Teresa.
I love Gail's thinking. Yes, unfortunately, that's the system we live in, and we need to figure out how to change it, how to improve upon it, all those things. But I wanted to expand on my my comment on creating spaces for sharing and promising practices and lived experience. One of the things that I observed in my tour of the institutions is that all institutions, again, struggle with funding, and they want to prepare. What I heard is we want to prepare our staff and faculty on DEI work. We just don't have the capacity, we don't have the funding to do it. You know, what would it look like if the HECC provided those kinds of trainings or provided opportunities where institutions are sharing best practices so that they're not reinventing the wheel all the time, because that's a lot of time and energy that's spent on doing your own stuff as opposed to you know, let's learn from each other. And our institutions really do work in silos, and I feel sad for that, because our students struggle, and then there's a sense of competitiveness. I think mostly with our universities, not so much our community colleges. I feel like our community colleges work pretty well together, but our universities are definitely all very competitive. And I do agree that our funding system is a bit skewed, because it doesn't really necessarily address the needs of all the institutions. So give one quick example. Western Oregon University has a high proportion of first gen and immigrant student populations, which is very reflective of our community colleges. But our funding doesn't necessarily provide the extra support that small institution needs to address the needs of that many first gen and immigrant student populations. And so I feel like that's something that we definitely need to look at, you know, and think about what would it look like, again, going back to Gail, if we did not need to depend on the legislature for funding, and what, you know, how would our students benefit from it, and how many more could we graduate, how many more could we retain, because I think that's the other issue. We're getting students in the door, but we're not retaining them. They stop out, and then it takes a while for them to come back, or if they ever do.
I'll just add to that, because we're dependent on legislature and it's on a biennium basis, we don't plan more than 2 years out. And to build a successful initiative, it takes more than that. So that's been a hard thing for me. No better example than this biennium we're in. We were told to plan for potentially a reduction in our community college support fund due to the projections of the economy, due to historical enrollment. And fortunately, you know, the projections for the state came in better, so we did receive that. But we weren't planning for that. Now we're rushing. We have very strategic and thoughtful ways we're going to spend this money, but not in the same way as we would if we knew money was there and it would be here 3 years from now. It's hard to build these initiatives we're talking about in this conversation on a biennium basis, or, we put money in this biennium for this initiative as though we're going to solve it in 2 years. It gets very difficult to make meaningful change with so much instability. Even when you get it, it's not stable.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to put question 8 in the chat, which is one of the HEC's strategic focus areas of focus is to streamline learner pathways. What are your thoughts on the ways the HEC can impact this? Yeah.
Well, I have some strong opinions about this. I think that, that whole idea of bridging what readiness looks like for on time to graduation, no matter what the outcome you want that graduation to look like, that, just specifically conversations about, higher ed doesn't want to fund developmental ed. So whose fault is that? I mean, it's if you're student centered, what happens to the student in terms of affordability, completion, streamlining. So I just think we've got to do a better job on that, of just the idea of what readiness to succeed looks like.
Thank you. Kaya.
Okay, remember to click 2 things that time. I agree with that. And I think that the other important role that they can play, and I think they do a pretty good job of it, is, as someone mentioned earlier, being those bridge builders, really reaching into the pre-K-12 system as a partner and looking also into the employer community and workforce community. And HEC does a little bit of that. They've got the youth programs. They've also got the workforce initiatives. So in some ways, there are some partnerships already built in. I know they have a strong relationship with, the Department of Ed, so that they play a very effective and important role in helping to be those bridge builders and just reinforcing that, raising the issues and communicating the data that helps us all kind of make those informed decisions. To just really think about how we make this one streamlined process as opposed to very distinct and different systems.
Thank you. Teresa.
Yeah, this issue is really important to so many of us, because we want to make sure that our students are graduating on time. And that's both in the K-12 and to post-secondary. And if students don't know in high school how many credits they can take and what actually transfers into community college, and then what transfers into post-secondary or into university, or if a student decides to go back to community college from university, what transfers, or wants to go back to community college and what transfers. We do not have a streamlined system right now at all. I know that we passed a law in 2017 to help mitigate some very specific courses, and I know that's happened, but we're still far away from having a fully functional, streamlined transfer of credit system, where it really does hurt our students, where they have to spend more money because some of the credits don't transfer into all of our community colleges or universities from the high school, and equally from community college into university. And so if we're talking about access and affordability, we have a system that's, keeping our students from graduating simply because of that credit transfer. And so we need to figure that out. That is definitely an area that is really important. And there's so many issues, so many challenges that we need to resolve. And I think that's a big one. And, I think that the HECC can definitely play a role in partnering with ODE to help educate, the students and the educators who are teaching college courses at that level, and definitely streamlining the systems in between all of that. That's definitely important.
Thank you. Aware of our time, so I'm just going to drop our last question into the chat, which is that another focus area is expanding opportunity through outreach. Where do you think the HECC should focus its efforts in that area?
I think they're in this room. I think Dr. Williams and ODE is a big place. I think Business Council and where are we getting post-secondary students from, and where are we sending them to, and how can HECC help make sure that the product that we're developing is getting a chance to get in the door and is meeting our workforce needs.
Yeah, Teresa.
My comment could be very popular or not at all. So one of the areas that I feel we need to really work on, and I don't necessarily know if it's the HECC or institutions, or the HECC telling our institutions, or our institutions working with the HECC, or it could be all of the above. But this idea that when we recruit and do outreach for students, that we don't just talk to students, that we talk to the entire family as a whole, and that we educate the parents and the guardians, whoever the adult is in, and sometimes it's foster youth, right? Whoever it is, that we are educating the entire family about the opportunities students have post GED or K-12 high school. It is such a, I feel like I've talked a lot about it, but I haven't heard any sustainable projects or planning around what program can exist, right? And so I've shared some of my experiences that I've done with the program I led, and don't want to take too much time, but essentially I created a parent college day where I brought parents on campus and had them experience being a college student all in one day. And these parents were like, oh my gosh, now I know what my child goes through or is expected to do. And then I had a full graduation and got caps and gowns, and they were just as nervous as we all were when we graduated. So these kind of simple concepts, if all of the institutions adopted it, can you imagine how much our parents would play a role in being a cool conspirator or, and helping our students really be that successful. So I just, I want to throw that out there because I think it's definitely a thing that the HECC could lead and work with ODE. And I think we could have more people when they think about what are you going to do up to after high school or GED, and they have an idea because their parents are also helping with that thinking.
Thank you. So I'm aware of our time, so we will wrap up, and want to respect you all making space in your days for this really important conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time. We got some incredibly valuable insights and input, so thanks again. I'm going to pop Colleen's email into the chat, and so if you have anything else that we didn't get to that you want to share, please feel free to shoot an email over to us with any additional input or insights. Thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate the work you all do every day. Take care.
Thank you.